is ANTIC, the AtariAge Bit Podcast.
I actually use the Atari as my computer, right? I couldn't write any code on one of my PCs, whereas if I'm going to write code, I do it on the Atari.
This is ANTIC, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Bob Woolley has been upgrading and modifying Atari 8-bit computers, primarily the 1200XL, since it was released. His hardware projects include video output improvements, keyboard repairs, built-in CompactFlash cards, a dual-ANTIC computer, and a parallel bus interface for the 1200XL. Bob was editor of Atari Classics magazine from approximately 1994 through 1997. He is still active in the San Leandro Computer Club and on the AtariAge forums. This interview took place on March 14, 2017.
Yeah, I actually started out playing with the RCA Cosmac machine. Mm-hmm. It's a little 8-bit CMOS processor that RCA had designed. And so I was making little hardware projects and writing little code, very little code. I mean, we're talking 40 bytes. And there was no assembler or anything like that, so everything had to be done in machine language, literally. Anyway, I was playing with that. For fun, we bought an Atari 2600, and we were having a good time playing games on that. But one day I was looking at the 2600. We had like 30 cartridges, and back then they cost quite a bit, $30, $40 a piece. Mm-hmm. And I'm adding it up in my head, and I go, Jesus, we spent, $1,200, $1,500 on this dumb game machine. I could buy a computer for that much, so I did. I bought a 400, which, that really wasn't a lot better than the 2600, but at least at least you could type on the keyboard after a fashion.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, I didn't have a disk drive, and it didn't take me very long to figure out I had to have a disk drive if I was going to do anything useful. Mm-hmm. So I bought an 810, and then the 1200XL came out. I thought, well, there's a, get rid of this 400's limitations, right? This machine has real memory in it and a real keyboard, and then it started from there.
Nice. So were you programming it? How were you using those machines? Or did you jump straight into the hardware hacking, or what?
Yeah, I didn't do very much programming on it. I was more into just playing with the hardware. The first thing you notice about the 1200XL is the video is terrible. Mm-hmm. So I started working on that. We played some games on it, but it soon reached a point where it was Daddy's machine and not for games, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I never did a lot of programming per se. Probably the biggest program I ever wrote was the driver for the IDE interface. And even that, wasn't all that big. It fit in 256 bytes of the memory. Mm.
So how do you? I'm curious how you got. Did you have an electronics background? I mean, what? I mean, yeah, people would have been scared to open up the machine and start hacking on it. So, but you.
Yeah, I have been playing with electronics since high school. In high school, I tasked myself with a project to build a transistorized oscilloscope. Back then, they were all tubes. Well, actually, the Tektronix machine had just come out. So this would be in the 60s, right? So I sat down and just read a lot, really. Read all the books I could find on circuit design and that kind of thing, which, there weren't a whole lot of them. So I just worked on the oscilloscope and gradually managed to do things like I made my own printed circuit boards with fingernail polish as a resist and etched them in my bedroom. The walls in my bathroom are probably still stained with that ferric chloride that I spilled in there because the stuff does not come out. So yeah, I played with electronics. People gave me old televisions, tube televisions, and I'm lucky I didn't kill myself because I shocked myself 2 or 3 times playing around in the television. I mean, I couldn't do anything useful in the television, but those things have a couple of 100 volts of B+ voltage, and it'd be pretty easy to kill yourself on it. So I survived that. And like I said, eventually I got into the I think it was in 1960, 62, 61. Right in there, they came out with that 8080 computer or 8008 computer. I'm not sure which one it was. In Popular Electronics. So I started fooling around with the Cosmac machine after that. I went to. I finally graduated from high school and went to Davis. And graduated in electrical engineering. So I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering, but I'm not sure I learned a lot of electronics in college. They're more into theoretical and doing it mathematically than wiring everything together and see how it works. Oh, I remember, in June of, it can't have been 60, they made a postage stamp-sized audio amplifier, and I remember I made that, and it's just wires, 3-dimensional. You wire this here, and you bend that around there and wire it up, and it's a little 3-transistor thing. I've still got a box of that stuff around here somewhere. Anyway,
nice.
I'm wandering here. So I had an engineering degree, but I wasn't doing engineering work. I was working on mainframe computers, and that didn't really. The mainframe didn't really have much of an application in the personal computer field at that point in time. We were lucky to have floppy drives, 64K of memory. So that's how I kind of backed into it. I guess the whole thing started when I was a freshman in high school, and all my friends were taking world history, and I just did not want to take world history as a freshman in high school. I didn't want to take it as anything in high school. So I said, well, I'm going to take electric shop. And I had no clue about anything electronic or any of that kind of stuff. And that kind of got me started on it. And it went from there. If I'd have taken world history, who knows what I'd be doing.
So I've been, before our interview, I researched, look around, and I've just found the internet littered with articles that you have written or references to you over the years about modifying this or that. There's the 1200 XL video upgrade, and there was a keyboard upgrade, and a PBI thing, and something about modifying an XCP80 to use with TTL monitors. And it seems like there's nothing 8-bit related that you haven't hacked on, modified, or tweaked somehow. Tell me about some of those projects, and how you came about them, and how you learned all that, what you discovered.
Yeah, somehow psychologically, I'm driven to fix things. If you have something like a 1200 XL and then you notice the video's bad, I want to fix it. Okay, it just bothers me that it's the way it is, and there ought to be a way to fix it. So I would either do something to fix the problem, or to utilize the device in a more useful fashion, and then it comes to you. Like one of the first things I did, I remember, was enable the memory in D6 and D7, and it was fairly simple. It's a fairly simple circuit. And then I modified DOS so that you could put the buffers up there. There's 512 bytes of buffer space. So then you had 2.0 with more memory, main memory available, because you didn't have to pull buffers out of main memory, or you could also use it in double density, and you just had more buffer space. And that, I think, was one of the earlier ones that I did that was a hardware thing. I took it. I was in the San Leandro. We still are in the San Leandro Computer Club. Come to the meeting, guys. Anyway, I took it to the San Leandro Club meeting and did a song and dance. This does D6 is dog 6 and dog 7 is what I called it. And I ended up with this sea of blank faces out there, because I don't think most of those guys had a clue as to what I was talking about. Some of them did, but I remember at that little presentation, which was one of the first things I did in front of the club, I resolved myself to be a little more to not assume so much on the part of the users of the system. They didn't all want to go read the schematic, and they didn't all want to run along things that I did.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was one of the early ones. I did memory upgrade, but I didn't invent them. I just did them, put them in the machines to see how they would work. And I did 80 column adapter. I did a dual-ANTIC. That was pretty cool. Where you could run two screens at once. You could program, you could point at one of the antics and say, okay, here's your display list, and here's your data and all that stuff. Then you jump over, point to the other antic, and tell him, okay, here's your display list and here's your data, and they would run independently. They don't really need anything in particular from the system.
Wow.
So you could superimpose two ANTIC screens on top of each other.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I remember that was later in the game when Bob Brody was the user group interface to Atari, and he was at the meeting. He thought that was pretty cool. I mean, he came in, he looked at the picture, the video, the display that was up, and said, "Whoa!" It was a Christmas tree. I remember it was Christmas time, so it was a Christmas tree with lights superimposed on it, so that it did look pretty cool. It wasn't. It wasn't as good as a professional artist could do, but it was something that I hacked together.
Did you ever fry machines trying experiments like this?
The who?
Did you ever fry machines while trying these experiments?
No.
Wow.
No. And the only machines I ever blew up, I blew it up. I damaged one machine plugging the PBI in. In the back of the machine, I had some device out there, and I plugged it in hot, and it didn't like that at all. So but I modified some machines so that now they're difficult to, you have to put them back to stock if you want to do anything else with them. I try not to cut traces when I do something, so that it's fairly easy to put it back together, especially in a 1200 where everything is socketed. I don't mind desoldering things, but when you cut traces, then you have to go back and replace the trace or repair the trace, which I don't know. I stay away from that as much as I can. I have a lot of machines that I've modified. A lot. I have maybe 10 or 15 or so that I've modified, and so they're no longer usable as a stock machine. But I could put them all back if I wanted to.
Sure.
I went down to there was a place called San Leandro Computer. I'm in the Bay Area, there were just tons of Atari. A lot of guys in the club worked at Atari, and there were a number of big time Atari stores in the area. And anyway, one of them was called San Leandro Computer. He was going out of business, so I went down there and bought just a truckload, literally, of stuff. And one of the things I got was maybe 50 1200 XL boards, just the motherboard. And so I've always had a pretty good stock. I don't have to worry too much about, well, I have to put this machine back to stock and then I can modify something. I just grab another one, and that's going to catch up to me eventually. But for right now, that's what I've been doing. Is I have a couple of cases of motherboards that are modified. Some of them, unfortunately, I don't even know what the modification is. But I've been good of late marking things so that I don't have to trace it all down and figure out, what the heck is this machine.
Can you tell me about some of the other interesting or unusual mods that you've done? I think that, such as the dual-ANTIC?
Well, I mounted an IDE drive in a 1200 XL. Made the interface for that, the code for that. And that worked out pretty well. Then I carried on from that and set up a CompactFlash card in a 1200 XL, which didn't take anywhere near as much room, and it didn't take as much power. And that works really well. And then I'm still doing 14 megahertz machine. I did a 7 megahertz machine. Now I'm working on a 14 megahertz machine.
Wow.
Which, it works pretty well. It's surprising that you can actually convert a 1200 XL into a 14 megahertz machine without doing any wiring at all. It just plugs in.
Wow. And it's still a 6502 running the show?
No, it's a 65816. But unfortunately the machines that they made, particularly the 1200 XL, they don't really have a lot of headroom for pushing things down the wires faster. They're, even a stock 1200 XL won't run some cartridges because of the poor transmission characteristics of the motherboard. So it's quite a challenge to get a 14 megahertz machine running everything. It'll run a lot of things, but there's hardware and things that don't run, and it's kind of discouraging. That it works so well everywhere else, but it won't run Basic XL, right? Well, that's silly. It's got to run Basic XL. But so I've been poking around on those. They have a 14 megahertz machine, the Rapidus. And evidently guys are doing pretty well with that. And if you look at it, you can see there's a lot of interface chips on that guy. These guys over in Europe, they can build stuff that's amazing. I mean, the hardware that they can build, the boards and the integrated circuits they can mount and that kind of thing. It makes me kind of reminds me of the old days when I was making printed circuit boards in my bathroom with fingernail polish, right? Those guys are awesome. Anyway, that has a lot of circuitry on it, and I don't have the capability of building something with that much circuitry, so we kind of keep it simple and do whatever we can.
So why the 1200 XL? I mean, other machines came after. Is it simply because that's the one you've got a caseload of in your in your basement, or is there something special about that machine that makes you want to keep hacking on it?
Well, it's all socketed. It's big, so it has a lot of room in it. It has a really nice keyboard that you have to fix, of course. And I don't know what other advantages it may or may not have. It doesn't have some of the circuitry the newer machines have, like the 130XE. But it's a nice base. You're not limited in physical access dimensions. So yeah, just all of those things. It uses a standard power supply, an AC supply, and it works. It works for me anyway.
All right. Why are you still in this hobby? I mean, it's pretty unusual not unheard of, but pretty unusual for someone to still be playing with Atari machines 30, 35 years later. And so what keeps you coming back?
Well, from a practical standpoint, I don't need to upgrade these machines. I have a little quick and dirty fix for the video on the 1200 XL, and it doesn't take very long to do, so it's kind of silly not to do it. But I actually use the Atari as my computer, right? I couldn't write any code on one of my PCs,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'm going to write code, I do it on the Atari. So I do simple things in BASIC. I remember my granddaughter was taking chemistry, and they gave her this absolutely ridiculous equation to balance. It had like coefficients of 1,584 and things like that. So, it was an extra credit type thing, but she brought it over, and I said, "Oh, okay, we'll write a little program here." And so we did. We just wrote a little program in BASIC, and it just sit there and, ran through all the permutations that you could to factor these things, and it grounded out. It balanced the equation. It was fairly simple, and and it's typical of the kinds of things you want to do on a computer, but you don't want to. At least I don't want to deal with PC type stuff. Although I have done, I did a couple of little things in BASIC on the PC, but I just know so much more about the Atari. I don't want to learn anything about the PC.
Mm-hmm.
that I don't have to. I do simple things like mailing labels and envelopes, and I write my checks on the Atari. And of course I cheat because I send the data over to the laser printer from the Atari over the serial I/O to USB,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the PC sitting there driving the laser printer.
Right.
But that's okay. I mean, and so I can program the laser printer to run in PCL5 mode or text mode, or I can make it do whatever I want. And it's easy, at least to me it is. So if I'm going to do something on a computer, actually computing and not reading emails and things like that, I do it on an Atari. Do it on my 1200. And some of the things that I want to do, they take up a lot of storage space.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I did with the CompactFlash card interface is I set it up so that it would handle thousands and thousands of virtual floppy disks, and you want to search them, or or you have the ability to search them, you can do a directory and search the directory, and it'll just crank through them. It takes a little while, but it works okay. It'll actually search the whole CompactFlash card for a file name you give it, and we're talking thousands of files. So some things require something like a CompactFlash card, and the same thing goes with the 14 megahertz machine. You can run the interface, the serial I/O to USB, flat out with a divisor of 0, really. If you make the CPU run a little faster, and you don't need any special tricks, or which gives you quite an advantage in that it's almost being like being directly on the hard drive, because it runs so fast. I mean, the sectors just go spinning off. Anyway, I use my Atari as my computer.
Nice.
If I have a computer thing to do, I do it on the Atari. My PC stuff, that Dell laptop sitting in front of me is a toaster.
It's an interface to the Atari.
Yeah, it's nice to have on my Atari. And really, that's what computers are for. I mean, if you actually have a computer and you want to, I don't know what you'd want to do, but anything you want to do, you can print or you can calculate, or you do it on the Atari.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any applications that need something other than a fairly simple basic program. Things like web crawling and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to do that on the Atari, but I have my appliance machine over here that does it for me, and if it doesn't do it for me, it's too bad, because I'm not going to write an application like that.
Sure.
So that's why I'm still playing around with Ataris.
Nice.
I haven't found anything better.
Awesome.
And it's really kind of silly. I used to do my labels on the PC, but I could never quite get it exactly the way I wanted it, and I was always running up against, this label's a little bit different than that, and what part number is this label? And or checks. Checks are even worse. I try to print my checks on the laser printer, number one, because these little dinky checks they give you can't fit everything on them. I don't know how people pay for stuff, but you put $381.52 and you've got 3 inches or whatever. Anyway, it's terribly difficult to do in Word, and it's pretty easy on the Atari. It's about 30 instructions. Anyway, go ahead.
Nice.
Over to you.
Okay. You were publisher of Atari Classics magazine for a while. I think you, approximately 1994 to 97, you took over from Bend, Poland.
Yeah.
Any stories there? Any thing to say about that?
That was incredibly difficult. That was not my shining moment. I was the editor of the San Leandro Computer Club newsletter for a number of years. But when I didn't want to see Atari Classics go away, but in all seriousness, picking up the gauntlet yourself wasn't a viable solution, really. I'm just not a newsletter publisher is one thing, but a magazine publisher is something else. And luckily, I had a friend of mine, an Atari guy, Jim Hood. He did a lot of the artwork and the front cover and the fonts, and he did a lot of work on the magazine. But he passed away right right while we were in the middle of it. And then it completely fell apart. That didn't. I wished we could keep it going, but there was no way I could keep it going. I shouldn't have been there in the first place, but yeah, that was a trip.
Sounds like a case of wanting to do it, but not being your skill set.
Yeah, and it's not in my time allocation either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. I don't think I would have hired me to do that.
So I always ask, and this is kind of a moot point because you are an AtariAge user and you have access to the community, but I always ask this. If you could send a message to the Atari community that still exists, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to keep the communication lines open. There are people all over the place that are lonely Atari users. I have run into so many people that had really cool things, and they maybe ran into a problem, and they just don't have a resource. So it's, I don't know how you would affect that, but I know AtariAge, everything just about is connected through AtariAge that I'm aware of, but there has to be other venues that we can use to communicate. There's a lot of people out there that are beating their head against the wall when they really shouldn't have to. That a lot of these things have been resolved, or people have good ideas. I know one of the things I see a lot is, my 800XL, when I turn it on, it goes fuzzy and it doesn't, and how do I fix it? And the answer to that question is good luck. If you don't have a machine to swap all the parts out of, and you don't have a scope, and you don't have this, you don't have that, you may not be able to fix it because there's a lot of parts in there. But in some instances they are. It's a known problem, and all kinds of people could tell you how to fix it. The San Leandro Computer Club still meets after all these years. We don't have a newsletter or anything like that. But we're kind of, off the main path. We don't. We have a website, but we don't really communicate that much with other groups like we used to. We used to get newsletters from all over the United States in the newsletter exchange. So we have a guy that's scanning those newsletters right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I brought him. He says, "Yeah, you got any old newsletters from other groups?" I said, "Oh yeah. Here's 300."
Is he going to publish those on the Internet Archive or something like that?
No, he's got them on a thumb drive. He did the San Leandro Computer Club newsletters, and we're still missing a few of those. But no, he just puts them on a thumb drive, and we take them home and put them in with all the other stuff we have.
Nice.
But no, I don't think we have any plans. I don't know. It's a good idea.
Well, I have scanned dozens not hundreds, well, maybe hundreds, but I've scanned many Atari newsletters and published them, put them on the Internet Archive so that they're available as historical references. So if I can convince you guys to do that, or to hand them to me, and I'll do it, but they need to. They don't help many people on a thumb drive, but up on the internet, they help everyone.
Yeah, well, I'll get what he has at the next meeting, and we don't have any way to transmit 4 megabytes of data, practically speaking.
Right.
But I don't know. We'll ship it to you on a thumb drive.
Great. Yeah.
This guy works at Fry's, so we have plenty of thumb drives.
I bet. Thanks. So what haven't I asked you about the Atari days that I should have?
Atari days? It's still Atari days.
You're right. That's how I usually phrase the question, but for you, that's the wrong way to phrase it. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
You didn't ask anything about CompuServe.
No, I should have. You were super active on CompuServe.
Yeah. Yeah, CompuServe was really just awesome. We were using our Atari computers to get there. At least I was. And it was just loaded with people. I have disc after disc after disc of things that I downloaded from CompuServe. I was sorry to see CompuServe go. We were kind of lost there for a number of years, I think, until I found AtariAge anyway.
Yeah, there were a number of good communities that have gone away. There was the Cleveland Freenet Atari group, and CompuServe, of course, and just communities that just did not last as long as the community needed them to.
Yeah, well, hopefully they've morphed into something else.
Yeah.
Like I said, I know there's a lot of single users out there that are still plucking away, and as long as they can find what they need, they'd be okay.
Yeah.
Because there's still a couple of stores that are open. I moved up into Placerville, which is not too far from the old B&C Computer Vision. His stuff is just down the road. I need to go down there and say hi. It's been a long time.
So on CompuServe, were you just a user, or were you a forum manager in the Atari forum?
I was a sysup, I think they called them. And basically, they just gave you free access to it. I didn't really have any assignment. There wasn't. I don't think they expect you to do anything except you come on there and talk to people, right? I mean, just do what you're doing, which was nice because it was pretty easy back in those days to spend a whole lot of money talking on the phone. They were long distance calls, or they charged you to use their systems. So I was a sysop.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, it was fun. There were a lot of people on there that, I mean, big time. That was back when there was thousands of users all over the place. Which it was kind of nice being in the Bay Area because you could actually go down to Atari, and people like Bill Wilkinson, he went to the club meetings down in Santa Clara. There were a lot of neat guys down there.
I think I have what I need, Bob. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are 2 ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.